Feeling more drained at the end of your workday? Well, you're certainly not alone. For those of us working from home, video chat is helping us stay employed and connected. But what makes it so tiring? Dr. Nick Morgan is one of America's top communication consultants and coaches. He's the author of the bestseller, Can You Hear Me? How to Connect with People in a Virtual World. He joins us on Newspoint today to talk about Zoom fatigue, its causes, and its potential solutions. Thanks so much for joining us, Dr. Morgan.
It's a great pleasure to be with you, even virtually.
When you published that book in 2018, could you ever have imagined how timely it would be with a global pandemic on our doorstep?
No, and I'm going to go on record as an author who will say, I wish the thing that made my book sell a lot more copies had not happened, because, of course, it's an ill wind that blows nobody any good. But this is one that we all wish had never happened.
Well, we were all headed down that digital highway anyway, which made the book so timely.
That's right. We were living in what I was calling a half real, half virtual world. And suddenly then it became all virtual. And that's been the tough transition for most people. The startling statistic for me was when I did the research in 2018, 2017, 5% of companies use Zoom or equivalent on a regular basis. Now, of course, it's 100%.
That is an incredible statistic. Complaints about the workplace have been around forever. So why aren't people happier about working from home?
Yeah, it's a great question. You don't have to commute anymore. Isn't that wonderful? No more sitting in cars or on subways or however you used to get to work. The problem is that we humans are hardwired to get both emotional nourishment and information from being in each other's presence. It's mostly unconscious. It's all to do with body language, but that's how we get our read and our connection with other human beings. You take that away, you put us in a virtual world, and even with Zoom, where you can see, you think, the other person, we don't get the same wealth of information. And so we're starved for information, and there are few other issues to do with Zoom that we can talk about if we have time. But on the whole, it's just the strength of that human connection is not as vital as it is face-to-face.
Well, you say that we need to learn to live smarter and communicate differently in order to survive this brave new world. How does that apply especially today?
Well, what we humans care about more than we care about the specific words we might use is each other's intent. I want to know, are you a friendly person? Do you mean well to me? Or are you somebody in the workplace who's going to try to undermine me or maybe take over my department or something like that? Those are the kinds of questions that matter a lot to us. And we don't get a good read on intent in the virtual world. That's what we're hardwired to get face-to-face very easily. If I shake somebody's hand and I look him or her in the eye, I can get a sense of whether I trust them or not and whether they like me or not. That's much harder to do even on Zoom. And so we find it unsatisfying. The key question is, what is the other person's intent? And we can't get a good answer, as good an answer, from the virtual world.
Well, body language certainly is a big part of the conversation and much more difficult on a screen.
That's right. I mean, the first thing to remember is, even though we're very used to looking at screens are two-dimensional. And so your beautiful, big, three-dimensional face is squeezed into 2 dimensions. And what that does is it flattens out your affect just as it flattens out your face. It's just a little harder to read. And that's just the first issue. The sound is also compressed, and human sound signatures have an extraordinary range of highs and lows, of overtones and undertones, without getting too technical. And in the virtual world, that sound is compressed, and so the human sound isn't as rich. And as anybody who's ever done television or watched movies know, the sound is an incredibly important part of the overall experience.
But it doesn't have to be all doom and gloom. You say whatever you need to do to amp up your perceived emotional score, do it. How can you do that, and how can you have it feel natural?
Well, it isn't going to feel natural at first, but watch as I bring my hands up into the screen and I start waving them around. What I can do then is I amp myself up a little bit because I get excited waving my hands around, and that also creates some energy and connection with the person on the other end of the screen. And so you need to gesture more, you need to talk a little more animatedly, you need to amp it up. It is a performance because it's you in 2 dimensions, not 3. And so you have to work a little harder. But once you try it for a while and get the hang of it, you'll find it's not so bad. It can even be kind of fun sometimes.
Well, you have some other great tips for video chat survival that I'm sure our viewers are just itching to hear.
Yeah, absolutely. Keep it short. That's important. Make it interactive. Don't try to do all the work yourself. Share the wealth. There's great research that shows if, for instance, you're on a work team, if everybody participates equally, then the quality of the work is much higher and the team spirit, esprit de corps, is much better. And so spread the work around, make sure everybody participates. And then my favorite is make sure you put something in the background to give a sense of 3-dimensional depth to the picture. That actually helps us not react in such a stressful way. It's the 2-dimensional issue that's the problem for us. And so give us 3 dimensions. Don't use one of those virtual images of the New York City skyline or the Taj Mahal, because that makes you look like King Kong in that setting. We can't tell how big you are. And so stick to a real background, but give it some 3-dimensional, and that will 3-dimensional depth, and that will help.
And you also suggest that not every meeting has to be a video chat. The phone can sometimes work just as well.
Yes, when the people know each other and they're used to talking to each other, then you can reduce that sense of self-consciousness and always having to be on, and focus instead on brainstorming or something like that on the phone. And that can actually be more relaxing. So my recommendation is start with a couple of minutes of the video connection just to establish that everybody's in a room and has their clothes on and is being businesslike, and then move to the phone so that you can have a more relaxed conversation. Now, the problem with the phone is, since you can't see the other person nodding and smiling and sending the signals out that, hey, I'm about to stop talking, it's about to be your turn. That's what we get used to doing face to face. It doesn't work quite as well on the phone. So that's why I say talk to people that you know well or that you've already established a relationship with. Then you can move it to the phone.
I think as well, what a lot of people are missing is the connection with their coworkers on a day-to-day basis that is potentially water cooler chat. How do we maintain that camaraderie with our coworkers?
That's really difficult. That's, I think, the hardest thing. We humans are we're a communal species, even though we're brought up to think we're independent people. We actually are a communal species. That's why we love and we can't wait to go back to those sporting events and those political events and certainly musical celebrations. We're all dying to get back to those things. So how to put the water cooler back in? My recommendation is, when you're having a Zoom meeting, make sure with your colleagues, make sure you set off some time, not right at the very beginning of the meeting, because that's when everybody's figuring out how to use the mute button and figuring out how to set up their cameras and that kind of thing. But somewhere in the middle of the meeting, stop and say, let's take a few minutes just to check in with everybody and see how we're all doing. It's not quite as good, it's never going to be as good as face-to-face, but it's a good substitute.
We hear a lot of people saying they don't know how to shut it off at the end of the day. They feel like they're working around the clock, while other people are saying, gee, I don't feel like I'm being very productive. Is that all in our heads?
Well, yes, it's all in our heads, but it's very real. The issue is, back when we used to go to work in workplaces, and of course people have different experiences of this. Some people have been working from home for a long time and perhaps are more used to it. But you used to go to work and you could kind of count on your kids being at school, let's say. Right now, they may show up at any moment. And so it's not so much that you are simultaneously a parent and a coworker and a spouse or or in a relationship. It's that all those things are stacked one on top of another, and you never know what's going to come next. And so you have to, what we call in the business, code switch from one to another. That's what's hard. It's suddenly you've been a worker for the last 5 minutes, and suddenly you have to be a parent for 60 seconds. And then you have to go back to being a worker. That's what's hard about it. It's never knowing what's going to come next, and the fact that they're all stacked one on top of another. That's just very fatiguing. We're not used to doing that.
Well, once we get a handle on how to manage our meetings, what do you think our next challenge is going to be with a remote workforce?
Well, we need to solve this problem of three-dimensionality. We need to feel like we're showing up for each other in a more real way. Every virtual relationship degrades over time. And in the book, what I recommended back before the pandemic was, if you have a great virtual relationship, every now and then get together face to face, because that allows you to renew it and strengthen it and create the trust that you can only really create face to face. Well, we don't have that now. So all the virtual relationships are getting degraded over time. That's in large part because of the two-dimensional aspect of the virtual relationship. And so we need to learn to use some technology that will give us a sense of three-dimensionality. Maybe it's holograms, maybe it's virtual reality, but if we're going to be stuck in this for a long time, we're going to need to get a lot better at more sophisticated technology rather than just running away from it.
Finding ways to put the human connection back into our virtual world will be key to working remotely in the days, weeks, and months ahead. Thank you, Dr. Morgan, for sharing your expertise and your suggestions with us today.
It's a great pleasure. Thank you for having me.